realtor jokes as there are attorney jokes, but realtors tend to just go for the transaction and the closing. But that's not what we're all about. If we serve well, we do well. In other words, as we're moving through that transaction, really learning what your client's looking for and what their interests are, what their level of appetite for certain components of that are.
And finding the objectives of the client, whether it's a residential transaction, what are their objections, and on a commercial transaction, whether it's a buyer or a seller, why are they selling, why are they buying, and also learning their business inside and out, and getting to know what's going to meet their needs and their objectives. So it's important.
You bring up a great point, Bruce. I love that point because that's one of the things that's overlooked a lot. In other words, somebody takes a phone call and they say, hey, how many square feet are you looking for? What are your components or what are your needs? But they never went to go look at their current facility. So that operator is kind of assuming what they need. But it's like, hey, do you even know what 10,000 square feet look like? And I don't mean that, obnoxiously, but let's go look at what 10,000 square feet looks like.
10,000 square feet of warehouse space looks different than 10,000 square feet of manufacturing space.
Yeah.
Well, we're in a 10,000 square foot building, so that helps too.
Go.
So a visual right here, right?
Yeah, so to go back to your point, so then that call comes in, it's like, hey, what are kind of some of your wish list items on this thing in our search? But let me come see your current facility. Show me your current facility. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see how you operate. And then as you walk through that facility, and then you're kind of done with it, and it's like, hey, now that we've kind of seen your current operation, if you were to kind of start with a blank canvas, what would you change? What would you do differently? What do you wish you what did you do and wish you didn't do? And so all that stuff kind of comes into play.
Yeah, and also, if you can watch the business from start to finish of their production, you have your incoming and your outgoing production and your actual production where they're packaging or manufacturing, cutting tools, and how they're shipping it. What kind of dock space they need and all of that. So there's seeing the operation does help you understand it.
Yeah.
You have to have an understanding. On the residential end, I see a lot of times where people, you get a listing, right? And a lot of times you're getting a listing, you didn't maybe sell them that house. And I've had several times where you're looking and going, hey, this house didn't, it was shorter term than what even they thought, right? And I think when you're coming into a residential end, it's like you gotta, whenever you're selling a house to somebody, right? It's looking at, okay, what is your long-term plan here? Now, plans can always change, but it's understanding, okay, if we're buying on a 2-year plan, that's different than if we're buying on a 5-year or 10-year plan. And I tell every client, like, hey, especially recently, like, we have to buy this, begin with the end in mind. We have to look at this and say, okay, on a 5-year plan, or a 10-year plan, what's this look like for you? And let's make sure that that works and we're working inside of a budget that makes sense. Because a lot of times I've seen buyers where they pick up something and really quickly they either outgrow it or it just doesn't make sense for them anymore. And they're going, oh, shoot, you could have done better, right? If we would have maybe pushed you into something bigger or pushed you into something smaller and walked through that whole process with you. But,
Yeah, that's a difference, in agents too, because you've got those that like to churn more deals.
Yeah.
And we're looking for good representation for our clients and being able to really hone in on what it is they really need and help them out in a life perspective, not just a house or one transaction.
Not just a turn and burn. Yeah, there's a lot of transactional real estate happening out there, which I think a lot of people have been burned on and more sadly are going to get burned on.
Yeah.
Well, the more numbers of realtors there are, you've got big competitive pressures on realtors. So, and everybody's looking to make money and make a living at the real estate business, but not many are willing to commit the time and the effort and the learn about the business enough to where they can truly be a professional in the business.
Yeah, that kind of brings up a thought. When I first started, I remember you want to serve well, but you're also tempted by the bigger deals, the the bigger fee just because it organically goes with that. And I remember having that because I was getting a mix from both ends of the spectrum, kind of at the high end and at the low end, and my tendency was not to kind of work on the low end of it. And I'm like, how do you manage those in the mix of it? And the person, that I really respect and still do to this day and just has built an amazing career was like, Doug, all I can tell you is they're all good. They're all good. They're all important. And I've seen that in my career. Somebody that starts out with something, relatively simple, and you help navigate something, all of a sudden 10 years later, their scope of their transactions and their needs is just exploded in a different direction.
Great example.
And now you're involved in that in that process and journey with them.
A great example was a few years back when we had the big recession that we had, and almost 98% of every transaction was a distressed sale. Whether you were working with a buyer buying a distressed house or you're selling it for somebody. And the agents that embraced that were the only ones that did any business in that time. A lot of them went off and got other jobs or were working real estate as well as another job. And but the ones that embraced it learned how to do short sales. They learned how to work with the banks to be able to do foreclosures. And they had successful careers, and a lot of them are still in the business today.
I had a deal. I listed it was a tiny half-acre lot in Cedar Springs on a dirt road, right? It just 17 grand, right? And I listed it, I sold it, and I was working with this guy, really cool guy. He really liked me. He ended up selling to the neighbor and him, they hated each other, right? But I brokered this deal, or I get it all together. Okay, cool. 17 grand. I made a couple $100, right? Nothing. Year and a half later, that same gentleman, right? I didn't know anything really about him or his business. He contacted me and said, hey, I need to sell. He was in the adult foster care business, right? I've got 3 adult foster care homes, 1 in Cedar Springs, which is where this lot was next to. And then he had like 2 in Holland, right? So that one $17,000 deal turned into a $3.5 million list and sell. This is 5-6 years ago, right? But it was funny to me where it's like, okay, it worked really hard, just like it was any other transaction on a $17,000 transaction. Well, it turned into a $3.5 million list and sell. We had both ends of it. 2 or 3 years later, I remember thinking, okay, this is why you take the 17,000.
Right.
I'm sure there's 100 other agents who looked at that property and thought, well, this isn't worth my time, and they walked away. And I was just the young guy who, early in his career was like, yeah, well, let's do it. And dealing with the neighbor, and these 2 guys don't like each other. Finally, put it all together, and then 3 years later, you're like, okay, well, good job. Like that was worth it. So
yeah, that's a great example. I remember a deal early in my career. I mean, we were almost binding. We were heading into Easter weekend, and it just didn't feel right for my buyer. Seemed like it went a little too fast for them, but it was just a minor little, insignificant thing in the overall transaction, but it just didn't have a comfort level with the client. And so I remember talking to him late on a Friday, and it's like, man, it was that day we either needed to go under contract and effective or kind of pass on the deal. And I really wanted to lean in and say, hey, it'll work out. Let's just kind of get under contract. We'll have a due diligence period. We can kind of kill it anyways after that time period, just so that it can get under contract. And my gut feeling says, no, hey, there's a discomfort here that I really need to respect from the client. And I kind of reached back into my client and said, you know what? Well, let's release this thing. Let's just let it go. It'll still be there Monday morning after the holiday weekend. Go enjoy your weekend with your family. Enjoy the holiday. And I got a call Monday morning, and it's like, hey, so thank you for that, kind of space, because it really helped. It let me kind of release and not think about this thing over a holiday weekend. And I'm ready to go. Let's go full speed ahead. So that you could have leaned in as the salesperson, and got it under contract, gone into the weekend, but it's all client driven. So what's best for the client? How do we serve them,
Right.
the best that we know how, and navigating that.
any deal you want too bad's a bad deal, right? That was Rick Velting said that to me, and I think that saved me so many times thinking about it.
Yeah.
Whether it's for myself or for a client, where you're like, hey, you know what? If it's not meant to be, don't twist the elbow. Don't force anything that's doesn't need to be forced.
Yeah. Now on Lacuna Group, on our name, as we've defined this brand, and we've got Lacuna Group, which is a residential brand. and we got Lacuna Commercial Advisors, two completely separate companies. Kind of the same core value of serve well, you do well, but a different, a great residential agent is very different than a great commercial agent.
Yeah.
I mean, as we are in our careers longer and longer, we realize that. And a lot of times in the rural communities, they kind of get mixed in one bag because, they think a real estate license is a real estate license. A real estate license allows you to sell, Grandma's Cottage, and it also allows you to sell the Renaissance Center on the Detroit River in Metro Detroit, but a very different transaction. And as we entered that, I mean, I'm like introducing to my clients, hey, we've started our own thing, from the ground up, and the response is, hey, tell me about that. That is we're just really embraced. We've seen your career grow, and we love this, journey as a client, and we're really excited for this next step. And our Lacuna brand is, empty blank spaces is really its core value and its meaning. And so the feedback from the clients is just, man, this is really cool. We are 100% in. Let's go full speed ahead. And I've seen my career over the last year, in a pretty tough year. Yeah. I would say is up, 50%. Maybe if I did the numbers, it might even be up 100%. So all of a sudden the calls and the excitement from clients just fed on itself, and just super exciting to see that happen.
Awesome.
But you invested, your entire career, you've invested in your clients, right? So now your clients see you doing something, and they, it's instinctual almost, where they want to invest in you. So I think that it really speaks to how you've managed your career in the last, 15, 20 years. Yeah. So
and I don't think that's any different about me or you, So I think that's what we need to realize as agents. Sometimes we're scared to kind of go take that next step. But it's kind of comes back to our core values of Lacuna Group. It's relationship driven, and then it's us, having a passion for that. And, and what's so cool about it is the market changes so much. We talked about be relevant, stay relevant. It doesn't really matter if you've been in the market or in the business for 2 or 3 years or much longer. It's changing. So the things we're dealing with and navigating today are way different than what we dealt with maybe even 6 months ago or a year ago.
Yeah, it's still a people business. Bottom line, I mean, whether you were dealing with commercial real estate or residential real estate, it's what's best for the people that we work with. You've got to have a heart for people in their situations. So you're, we don't deal with brick and mortar. We can't. Last time I tried to talk to a wall, I didn't get any answers.
Yeah. We've all tried, though.
We've all tried. There's times you need to go have that discussion just to know that there's nothing there.
There's nothing there.
Yeah. Nothing there. And that kind of leads to another point on commercial and residential. I mean, again, as realtors, kind of mixed in a big bucket. You take the commercial side of things, and like in our market, in the West Michigan market, there's 320 commercial practitioners that are members of our local board of realtors, commercial board of realtors. If you take that back, even I'd say 10 years, but even 15 years or 20 years, it was about the same number. We might have lost 20, added 20. It was right around that 300 number. And if you look at the membership roster today of it back 10 or 15 years ago, 90% of them are still there. I mean, it's still the same core group of people. Whereas if you get on the residential side, there's a core group that are, professionals, career-minded, and they're, there, but the numbers are very different. And in West Michigan, I think it's kind of more like 3,000 agents. Yeah. If you go back 10 years, probably 80% of those people weren't members 10 years ago. Yeah. I'm just guessing, but I don't, it's probably closer to those numbers. It's probably largely more than half. So that's where, there's a stark difference between commercial and residential from an agent representation standpoint.
Yeah, but I think it goes back to kind of where we started, right? Some of these bigger national brands, I'll say, their goal, right, is if you can fog a mirror, you can sell real estate, right? I mean, they want the volume, right? They're not. I think their whole approach towards everything is different than what we're trying to do, right? Where we're saying, hey, it's all about the client, and we're kind of just servants, right? I think some of these brands are definitely focused on, okay, how many people can we cram in the door, because that's what our model needs to be, right?
Yeah, we're the opposite.
We're the opposite of that.
We're the opposite of that.
Yeah, we're the opposite of that, and they will equate number of licenses held to volume of real estate. Whereas the more licenses they hold in their company, they water down the percentage of transactions that they actually do
Yeah.
by percentage of agents to transaction. So really what they are taking on, they take on a lot of potential liability. Training is a big factor in a successful realtor. You know, the training that they get when they first start in the business, and then training is ongoing. It never ends in the business itself.
Yeah, you have to keep
Morphs.
evolving. Yeah.
It evolves constantly.
Yeah.
So if you're not keeping up with it, if you're doing real estate part-time, you're going to have a very difficult time keeping up with the business.
Yeah.
And at some point, you're going to probably drop out because you'll have a choice of either starting over, you're learning, and or giving it up and going on to something else.
I feel like that with my career. I feel like every, so many years, it's like you're constantly having to, hey, this is working, it's working until it doesn't, and you better shift quick.
Yeah.
And start figuring out that next step.
Yep.
That's what's so cool.
Because that's what it takes. Market shifts or whatever, a few, when I got in the business, right, it was foreclosures and everything else, and then all of a sudden we're running in the, this crazy hot market where it's escalation clauses and it's all this stuff, and that was a whole different thing we had to learn. And there's a lot of agents recently, they came into that market. So as we see this next shift, it's going to be a whole different thing of, when I got in the business, it was cold call, every day I was making X amount of cold calls and we're just tracking down
the
sellers.
lessons we learned during that period of time when there were a lot of foreclosures and everything, that was the greatest experience that an agent could have had, especially as we go through this new changing market that we're going through. Real estate always sells.
Yeah.
It never, it'll always sell. It may be price, maybe location, but there's not a piece of real estate on this earth that somebody won't pay for.
You sure?
I'm positive. I'll give you $1 for your house, right?
Yeah. Hey, I'll give you 2.
Give you 2. Oh,
double, yeah.
Do I hear 3?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's another component that organically, whether we realize it or not, but we have a passion for our industry, and so for other agents to kind of hang out with us, it's not from a top-down perspective, and you need to be doing that, you need to be doing that. There's a lot of right ways to build a great career in real estate, so it's kind of being a sounding board, saying, hey, I'm having a challenging transaction, or I'm challenged with this topic or that topic. And so, sitting down and, just grabbing a cup of coffee and saying, hey, share with me what, how you feel about that, or maybe we should spend our time on something else, and just being a sounding board for that, and adding some energy and some encouragement, because, that's forward movement. I mean, that's all positive stuff. We've learned some of our biggest lessons on some of our biggest challenges. And, I tell clients all the time that, if it was easy, you wouldn't need me.
Yeah.
If there was no risk in this, you wouldn't need me. If opportunities fell in your lap, you wouldn't need me. But, we're kind of taking what your goals and objectives are, and we're trying to live it and breathe it like our own and go fight for it and deliver those results. And also communicate honestly through the process. I don't need to over-communicate with you, but a lot of times conflict occurs when there's either not enough communication, and we hear that in the marketplace, and then there's other agents that try to over-communicate on it. On the commercial side, it's completely different, because it's like, your business clients are, what have you done for me lately kind of thing, and don't give me too much information. And it's so cool when you're, reaching out to clients that are at a high level, and, it's not going to voicemail. They're picking up the phone because they want to hear from you, man. And that's what's so cool about real estate. Everybody loves real estate. They love to hear about real estate and what's going on. And we are so blessed in the career and the journey that we're on.
Yeah, we can. I used to say you can go almost anywhere, and you can overhear a topic of somebody talking about real estate at one point or another. Whether you're sitting in a restaurant booth or at church or at school or whatever, there's always conversations about real estate, and it's random.
So that's not going to fit in an app, Bruce?
What?
That conversation's not going to fit in an app?
No, never. Not in a million years.